All right, we're live, everyone. Welcome to the Coaching to Flourish podcast, and I'm your host, Raj Anderson, Executive Life Coach and Coach Assessor. We're changing things up, aren't we, John? I'm going to be the host. What's happening?
I'm no longer the host of this segment, which I'm pleased about, and more than happy and honored to give the reins over to Raj here in this space. It's part. I mean, I think it's a natural evolution of where things are going, and I have the Let's Life Coach daily videos that we're developing. We're still running into a little bit of obstacles of trying to figure out what exactly those videos are going to look like in the structure of them and how to get them through, get them to publication. But with that shift, I'm still going to be here most weeks, but Raj is the official host. So, yay!
Thank you, John. I'm excited and honored, and I'm also excited that we've got all these different resources for people now. So we will still have the Coaching to Flourish for you to hear hot topics, receive valuable information on the coaching industry. We've got our guest speakers, and John is one of our guest expert speakers as well. And also send us your coaching questions, so get your coaching questions answered. Yeah, I do want to start, John, with the incredible video I just listened to on Be Your Life's Hero by Chadwick Boseman. And I'm really moved by that one in particular because I'm a huge Marvel fan. I just watched Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. And Chadwick Boseman is a real life hero of mine. As we all know, he battled cancer for 4 years while still filming those Marvel movies. He's particularly special to me. We share a birthday, so he's a real life superhero to me. But I was really interested in what you were saying, John, around legacy and your learning from Laura Whitworth. And why did you pick the topic of superheroes this week?
I was searching for a lot of Boseman's clips, and he has a number of inspiring clips. And I think so. When Black Panther first came out, it was. I mean, the cultural significance of it is massive, and this idea that you have, a figure, someone you can look up to, who is black and who is an action hero, and even that was groundbreaking. And you think, well, why did it take so long? Why? It's about time. And I was talking to a friend. So the movie came out. I was in. I think it was. Was I in DC? I don't know. I wasn't at home. I was traveling. I was giving a talk somewhere, and I called up one of my buddies from college, who's African American. He's one of my dearest friends, and we're chatting, and he's talking to me about this movie, what it meant for him. And he said when he was growing up, he did not. There was no black person dressed in that way who was a professional, who was a businessman, who was successful, who had all this stuff. He said that image alone, that representation matters. That gives generations of children someone to look up to. And Chadwick Boseman is that person. And the significance of that is enormous. So that alone, so yes, that video, I want to amplify his message, his voice, his legacy, and it's Black History Month, and so that's the reason for this video right here, right now. We have a couple more that are set to go that aren't related to Boseman, but have similar themes of superheroes, people taking those big steps. But Boseman, like a lot of it, what he did in his life, even before Black Panther, in moving the ball forward with representation and questioning stereotype, that to me is one of his biggest legacies, is really breaking down a lot of these stereotypes in really powerful, iconic ways. And he's Yeah, he's a huge figure.
Why do you think representation matters in coaching?
Yeah, coaching, I mean, it's a pretty white profession still. It's changing. Is it changing fast enough? I don't know. I think, I don't know, representation matters so much more than I think a lot of people give it credit for. And even talking about the idea of racism and when you're entering into these conversations, I feel like there's a certain level of uncomfort that just immediately gets inserted into like the space, especially people who especially white people who don't have a lot of experience with being on the other end of racism. It's like like when you're having a conversation and then like someone says, oh, I had a family member who just passed away. There's also a level of uncomfort, and to me it feels remarkably similar. You're like, oh, they can't do anything about it, they're sorry about it, but they just don't know how to handle it, and I'm sorry for your loss kind of thing. But there's like eggshells immediately like just show up everywhere. And I think it's important to have these conversations. It's important to be okay with the uncomfort and be in these spaces of human beings. Like, we are meant to communicate. We are meant to be empathetic with each other. And this is a really important, this is a hugely important topic that deserves to be talked about in the coaching world. The ICF has recently taken some steps in the positive direction to recognize this and to put some language into their recent, not so recent now, but it was a year or two now, a year and a half maybe,
Yeah.
where they changed the standards. So I think it's really useful to, yeah. I mean, I think the coaching profession itself, it's useful to have this awareness, and from the standpoint of the work that's been done in inclusion and diversity, is so powerful. There are so many learnings and insights that are useful to the coaching profession, and vice versa. There are a lot of insights that are happening in coaching profession that are also useful to the inclusion and diversity work. And I'm just humbled and thankful to be a part of it and to move the ball forward in any way I can.
And we did do a program, didn't we, about a year last year on inclusion coaching for coaches. And so I guess a few things for coaches to think about, who is in your circle of influence. You might want to check out the diversity wheel from John Hopkins as well. So how can we as coaches become more inclusive? Maybe perhaps there's a question you want to ask yourself, how do you meet your clients where they're at? What kind of curious questions do you ask, even in that first initial meeting? I think I've talked about this before, John. I do ask inclusion questions. I'm quite particular on asking people what they want to be called, or what do they identify with, or what diversity facets are important for me to know about them, so that I can think about how I might adapt my style of coaching. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, and it's totally part of, I think, what makes you an amazing coach. In an example is, yeah, these are really important. The intake form, and to ask these kind of questions, and to really, I mean, we can also go the other way too, where we make assumptions based on, even assumptions based on cultural awareness. But people, it's not like everyone who dresses or is of a certain religion has a certain diet. Like, you can make assumptions, but you don't know for sure. So, you can go the other way too, of being overly culturally sensitive. But I think the thing that I come back to, and I think what helps a lot for, like, to really facilitate this conversation, is that if someone makes a mistake, like, your intentions are good, but you make a mistake, the best thing to say is, thank you for letting me know. And I'm doing my best. I really want to be better. Thank you. How can I, and then to recognize it's not even the person who's telling you. It's not even the person's job to educate you. It's our own. I mean, it's our own responsibility to educate ourselves, and all the resources are there. It's not like these are unknown or we have to uncover them. No, they're all there. They're all known. But if you make a mistake, or if it doesn't go the way if someone like there was like in the World Cup when U.S. and Iran were in the World Cup, that one reporter asked one of the players who about racism in the United States, and the reporter started with, "You're saying Iran incorrectly. Like it's Iran, not Iran, and get it right. Like everyone in the U.S. does it." And so that was the beginning part. The reporter started like that, and then he said, "Well, how are you doing with, dealing with racism in the United States?" The player was black, and he modeled it. So, I mean, it was almost like, mwah. He said, "First off, thank you for letting me know how to pronounce your country's name. I'm sorry. I want to do better. I will get there." And then he went on to say, well, in the United States, at least there's a conversation around it. We at least have this conversation is open. In other parts of the world, it's not really that open, but you can't confuse the conversation that's happening here in the United States with, then that means that the problem here is worse in the United States than anywhere else in the world. You can't confuse those two. So that's really helpful for white people to know that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to, there are blind spots. And when that happens, to stay in gratitude and not try to defend.
I love that, John.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't defend. Just apologize, thank, and learn.
I love that. Apologize, thank, and learn. And I would add, I mean, it's easy to feel scared, isn't it? And think that you don't know. So do ask the questions. And if you're not sure, you can always reach out to us at Coach Training EDU. There is no controversial question you can ask me as well. So send me any of your questions. I worked in equality and diversity for a long time. And I liked how you referred to not making assumptions, not one size fits all. And just because someone's from a particular religion. And it reminds me of probably about 15 years ago, my dad was in hospital, and there was a lot happening at that time around equality, diversity, and inclusion. And the staff were trying to be really careful about even food and the food that they were giving patients. And I remember sitting there with my dad, and I might have shared this story before, and an Indian meal arrived for him. And there was an English white guy across from him who had fish and chips. And my dad was so upset. He said, "Why does that guy have fish and chips? And why do I have curry?" He said, "Nobody asked me. I fancy fish and chips." We laughed about it. And I went to speak to the nurses at the station. And I said, "This is where you need to ask." They might have made an assumption around what they thought his religion was, what he was going to eat, what he was going to eat. And actually, he just wanted to have that agency himself. He wanted to just be able to speak for himself. So it's funny now, but, if we think about it, we need to ask people, don't we? We need to ask them their preferences and not make assumptions around these things.
Yeah, and the hospital staff, they weren't trying to mess his day up.
No.
They were trying to be, you can assume positive intent until there's not. And then, you deal with that the other way in some ways. But yeah, I mean, for the hospital staff, let's say they go into defense and they say, well, like, this is why we did it. We're actually being culturally sensitive, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, just, oh, I'm sorry. Here are your fish and chips.
Exactly. I mean, my suggestion was let's swap. Because I think the other chap probably wanted a curry. Curry is the top food in the UK. So it's a perfect solution.
It's great. Curry's lovely. I prefer curry, right?
Exactly. So I'm going to switch gear just a tiny bit, but this is still on the topic of inclusion. So, we've been talking about diversity here, and I know you and I chatted, John, briefly last week around working alongside different generations. And we've had a question come in. What do you think? Do coaching strategies differ by generation?
That's interesting. I don't think so from a coaching standpoint. They don't differ by generation. They do differ by age, but once that generation gets to adult, then they don't. I know that there's a thing where a lot of people will talk about, well, the younger generations don't have the same like level of standards of work ethic, or they expect everything to be done, via text. They don't want to be, do face to face or conversations, or they're harder to hold accountable. I don't. I'm not. I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that one from like a work standpoint. From a coaching standpoint, there's no difference when you're working with someone who's 25 versus 65 in terms of like coaching technique. The difference when you're working with a young person is you sometimes have to set the agenda at the beginning and then work through ways of helping young people adapt the session agenda for themselves to move forward. That seems to be in play, but I don't think it has anything to do with generation, people who are used to phones growing up versus not. There might be something like brain wise, where younger generations are, maybe their like amygdalas are in hyperdrive and we have to have, coaching in a different way, but I don't know. I don't see it. I really don't. Even with my young ones who are like, teenagers, and I don't see any difference.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is sometimes themes that I've picked up. So when I'm working with younger generations, younger people, actually a lot of them are more advanced in doing work on themselves, I found, than I was.
Mm-hmm.
Or some of my clients are probably Gen Xers or boomers, because I'm finding that they're being introduced to it sooner through certain aspects of social media, wellness.
Mm-hmm.
There's been lots of trends around yoga and wellness eating. So I have found that some of my younger clients that I work with already journal, for example, or already keep a log, have a different perspective on the growth mindset. And especially in executive coaching, when we're coaching leaders, I found we launched a new cohort, which was a mixture of younger leaders and different generations. And it was quite exciting to see some of the reading that they were doing and some of the work that they've started on themselves. And some of the women from different generations were quite impressed. And I heard a couple of comments around, I wish I had known this when I was that age, or I wish I had access to this information in the same way.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I think it also does fit into this conversation though, of like what kind of assumptions are you making when you're working with younger people versus older people. I mean, our brains are designed to. I mean, our brains are literally designed to look for patterns.
Yeah.
And to make connections between, okay, this person is dressing this way, they're this age, their skin is this color, their culture is this. Oh, okay, let me fit in all the other patterns of all my past experiences with that. That happens in the subconscious mind. You can't stop that from happening. It doesn't stop. What we can do is we can make it conscious. And you can say, okay, a conscious choice. I am consciously now, like, choosing how I'm interacting with this person. And what the beautiful part of coaching is that it basically trains us to become aware of our assumptions and to become curious about them. It's lovely. It's why I love it. And to get into that, I mean, it's same thing with younger generations. Like, they're an individual. They're different from everyone else in the whole planet. So let's ask questions from that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, and don't make assumptions around technology either, because I've got plenty of people of all ages who are in a coaching portal and it works and they love it. And I've got others who are like, I don't want to go in there, just phone me. That's how I want to have coaching, and pen and paper's fine with me. And that is boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z as well, who we might make an assumption that Gen Z loves technology and apps. Actually, some of them want to go back old school and liking the pen and paper. So it's putting those assumptions to one side and meeting the person where they're at, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we're on time, John. Any final words from you today?
I just thankful for you, Raj, and for this. It feels right. It feels like all right. It's like this. We eventually get there. I think there's an element too of starting and being able to start and not having it look pretty at the beginning, perfectly managed or done, but just getting out there and starting. I remember when I first started my own coaching sessions, they were not good. They were okay, but they weren't great. But I just kept going. And I feel like the master skill might just be persistence, might be the ability to continue to move forward no matter what, trusting that eventually you're going to get where you need to go with that. So here we are.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to everyone who's listening, and we're just excited to bring you more coaching to Flourish and more inspirational videos from John. Look out for them.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.